Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Jane the Virgin, Season 1, Episode 6, Chapter 6. In this episode, Jane finally dumps Michael. It is a big step. I'm very proud of her, but also I don't feel like running right into another man's arms is exactly the way to play this. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Claire for commissioning this episode. What's up, Claire, if you're out there? So this episode is this is a tough one because what we deal with here are mean girls for the most part and how they are trying to sabotage Jane. Now, what's sort of interesting here is the way that some things are resolved with it and others aren't. And I'm not sure how long-term the solutions are going to be. I'm really curious on how it's all going to play out over time. But as of right now, it feels as if we've got at least one of the groups of mean girls in hand, and we'll see how it goes. But I had forgotten all about Jane's intent to become a teacher because really we don't see a lot regarding her schooling and all of that. We have seen her at work and we have seen her talk about wanting to become a teacher, but otherwise I just forget that's even a thing. So when she gets her placement for this sort of internship, I don't even know what one would call this. I'm sure she says it in the episode. I was genuinely taken off guard for a moment and was like, wait, what? And what's sort of funny is I know that the kind of job that Jane does at the hotel is not the kind of thing that you can do long term. And by that, I mean waitressing. And this is not to say that you absolutely can't. There are plenty of women who are just lifers and they work in restaurants as servers forever. And they, that's what they do until they retire. And I'm not saying that that's invalid or a loser thing to do, because a lot of people like to paint it that way and I don't believe it at all. You can make really good money serving, and the kind of place that she is working is the exact sort of place you make that good money. However, it is a real intense gig that does a lot to your body. And it's the sort of thing that while you can, if you stay in shape and are able to manage yourself, you can keep doing it as you get older, you really start to feel the wear and tear and you want to settle back and do something that is a little bit less physical if you can. But the problem is that what Jane wants to do instead is teach. And while I definitely understand the desire to work with kids and have an influence and do some good, there's also the aspect of how much Jane struggles financially already and just feeling like she's going to be taking such a pay cut when she does this. And I kept thinking about that the whole time. And I don't like being in that place, but this is what we've done. We've made teaching a job that you need a side gig to be able to do. And it sucks, man. It really does. But anyway, so let's start at the beginning here because we get the very first moment that she met Michael. And honestly, all I could think in this scene, because he shows up and it's her 21st birthday and he's very cute standing at the door and telling her that there is a noise complaint. And she is absolutely slammed, what it was, sozzled. Sozzled is the word we want. And she sees him standing there and she assumes that he's a stripper. And to be honest, seeing Michael in this uniform, because, he's a detective now, so he doesn't wear this uniform. We have seen him in his shirt and tie, but the uniform doesn't suit him at all. He looks wrong in it. And I suddenly was just like, oh, I don't buy it. You know, I feel like mostly the guys that I have seen in cop uniforms have a very sort of military cut to their hair, at least. And there's a sort of vibe to them of being like probably ex-military in some capacity, or at least influenced enough by the people they are around that they take on that aesthetic as part of fitting into the pack, because ACAB, that's all they care about. And the fact that he's here with his sideburns and whatnot and his sort of fluffy, like relaxed hair, I was just like, yeah, this doesn't suit at all. I feel like they should have styled him a little bit differently just for this scene in order to emphasize what a different situation he was in when he was still in uniform. But regardless, she's so sure that he is a cop, or that he is a stripper, that she grabs his gun out of his holster and shoots it through the ceiling of their apartment, which I really want to know what the fucking neighbors who made the noise complaint must think when they hear a gunshot go off. And hopefully that's the second floor of her own apartment and she didn't just shoot into somebody else's house. But anyway, this moment is, you know, she's like very infatuated with him right away. And we jump to the two of them hanging out after the party, watching the Passions of Santos, and he is sort of teasing her about it, and she is good-naturedly being like, you said you weren't going to pick it apart. And there's a whole scene where he is professing his love on this yacht, and it's snowing, and it's sort of a funny, like, the moment that he says, oh, so what now, it's snowing on the yacht? And I'm like, why wouldn't it snow on a yacht? You know, it snows like over the ocean as well, right? Or is it more that it's supposed to be like warm weather on the yacht, and then all of a sudden there's snow as well, even though it's like warm out? I think that's what, because he's saying like, well, shouldn't they have coats on? But yeah, I was just like, man, haven't you seen Titanic? There's a lot of snow going on in Titanic. Rowan says, I'm here, had trouble getting Spreaker to load. I think you mean Crowdcast, and same. I won't get into it, but fuck Crowdcast right now. Lauren says that house is the one she still lives in with her mom and grandma. Oh, so when he said neighbors, this is like house neighbors, not apartment neighbors. Okay. Thank you, Lauren. So she shot through her own bedroom, probably, or somebody's roof, her own roof. So the two of them have this like cute little moment together, and he kisses her, and there's a moment of it looking like it's snowing, and it turns out to be the drywall falling out of the hole in the ceiling onto them, giving it like this atmosphere. It is honestly really funny. Like, it's a cute bit, because I was looking at it, I was like, it's snowing, what? And I could see that it's like landing on her hair, and it's the wrong size for snow. And it's absolutely completely impossible that it would like shed like this, but I am completely willing to accept it. It's totally fine. So, especially as somebody recently, I've been redoing my living room, and I had to screw a bunch of hooks into the ceiling, and these hooks have made such dust on the rest of like everything in the room. It is unbelievable. So as much as I'm like, it wouldn't fall this way, maybe it wouldn't, but you know what it would do? Fucking make a mess. So I guess that's close enough. So we cut from this lovely moment of the two of them to him coming to her door with the package, and it is her wedding gown order that arrived at his house because she was staying with him and now she's not. And I'll tell you what, kids, you guys know I have been pretty hard on Michael in terms of feeling like I was on his team initially and understanding where he was coming from. As much as I felt like he wasn't going about things the right way, I still got how freaked out you would be in these circumstances, how out of control it would all feel. And also, he saw her with Rafael and how very obviously she had feelings for him. And that will fuck your head up. I mean, I'm just, it was very difficult for me to be as mad at him when I saw how obviously she cared about Rafael and was telling him it was nothing, and then would just be with Rafael the way that she was, where Michael could see. And even though there were a couple moments where he leapt to the wrong conclusions because circumstantially things looked bad for her and it wasn't what it looked like, to a degree in those moments, it was sometimes still a little bit what it looked like. Like when she fell in the pool and he jumped in after her, sure, that was an actual accident. But then they have the moment with him like moving her hair off her face and getting in pretty close, and it wasn't super appropriate. Like, so the fact that he got mad at her, I couldn't really blame him. However, I still felt like he was being really shitty in a lot of other ways. And I was starting to be like, if you don't get caught, you are going to have to tell her. And he doesn't tell her. She finds out, which in my opinion, that's really like case closed for me right there. The fact that he never came clean, and the fact that he was so dismissive about it when she caught him. I was really like, wow, dude, this is super pathetic. Like, there are so many ways you could have handled this and you chose the worst way. But this episode, it was really the nail in the coffin. He handles everything, every step of the way so badly that I felt like she 100% made the right decision in dumping him by the end of the episode. And I was really disgusted at how utterly shocked he was by the whole thing. So I'm going to deal with the two of them. I'm going to deal with their plot line right out of the gate altogether. So this moment where he's bringing her the dress and he's like, we really need to talk. And she says, I'm not ready to talk. And he looks at her and he says, come on, baby. We've got to get through this. I want to get married. And she says, I don't know if I want to. And I'll say this, dude's a good actor. Like, he convincingly seems absolutely devastated throughout. But he says, the whole thing that happened, me not telling you that Petra cheated on Rafael, it was awful. I know that. I am so sorry. And she says, I know you are. But I just keep thinking about all the other times that you have lied to me since then. And I thought this was really good. So what we get is a montage of every time that he has gaslit her throughout and told her that she's acting crazy, that she's hormonal, and him like covering up for the fact that Petra's in the room telling her it's a bad time. And then she says, and then I started thinking about the baby and how you were just going to let me give it to this couple that had all of these problems when you knew how much it meant to me for her to go to a stable family. And I was like, for her to go? Interesting. Okay. And she says, I'm sorry. I just need more time. And I need to see if I can forgive you and get past this. And he says, okay. And she goes inside and closes the door. And he stands there looking like he's been punched in the face. Now, I just really appreciate the montage because it is a good reminder to see all of the times that he made her feel like she was nuts. And then her mentioning how much it meant to her. And like, not only the fact that she wanted the kid to go to a stable home just for the sake of the child, in a general sense, but also knowing her history with having grown up in a single parent home, and it feels less like single parent with her abuela around, but nevertheless. And I really suddenly was like struck with how little he cares about what she cares about and how little he was concerned about the life of this child that was still half her. Like, and he finally comes to that conclusion where he tells her, I'm all in with you want to keep the kid. Yeah, it's not mine, but it's still yours. But it never seems like it quite registers for him that the kid is still going to be hers, and he was willing to let this kid that was half hers potentially really suffer, and how, like, what that looks like to her. And this is the sort of thing, you know, throughout the episode, there's an update to her calendar when she finds out that she's been put in this high school. And he messages her at one point and is like, what happened? I thought you wanted to be in middle school. And she explains that there was a mix up. And it's a really interesting, like, I liked the way that they show us the way that they type their texts out, because he is still using the sort of like the punctuation and whatnot that he had been, that's got a real friendly, warm tone. And she is ending everything with a period and just like giving him as little as possible. And he ends it with something like, I love you, Jane. And I was just like, sir, I know that you want her to confirm that things are going to be fine, but pushing her with, I love you, Jane, when you know she's not in a place to like do this right now. And she's made it very clear. It just felt so selfish to me. And he goes and sees her mother and is asking what he can do. And his mother says, give it time, I think. And he asks, is she still wearing her ring? And her mother tells him yes. And this was the moment that I felt like, okay, that's it. That's the point where he just really hears what he wants to hear. You can see her say time is the only way, because Shamara says when she thinks about you, she keeps picturing all of the things that happened. And he's like, well, how do I get rid of that picture? And that's when she says time. But he doesn't actually hear that part. He asks about the ring. She says yes. And he looks away from her with this smile on his face and this smirk that feels like he is so certain if she's still wearing it, he's got it in the bag and it's just a matter of time. But he doesn't see it as like a matter of time in the way she means it, which is to say actually letting things breathe and giving her space and letting this like play out. Instead, it's all like all of that is sidelined for him to start this little like fantasy evening that he thinks is going to solve everything. And this is the problem with people who are kind of selfish in the way that they view their partner, and also believe that their partner is like so caught up in rom-com stuff that one gesture is going to be enough to wipe everything else away. So when he gets that smirk on his face, and it killed me because, you know, I have been through this. I have left a fiance and I have actually gotten a divorce from somebody I was actually married to. And I remember my mom pointing out after I left my husband that I was still wearing the ring, and it was weirdly like more final. As Jane says, you can be like physically apart from somebody, but feel like, well, maybe there's a possibility that things will work out. And I weirdly had the ring on, even though not only did I know we weren't going to work it out, but I didn't really want to work it out. And it still was a big step for me to get rid of the ring and sell it and be done with it. So I very much sympathize with Jane keeping the ring on because she isn't really certain. But the fact that he takes that as a given, that she'll like be coming back, as somebody who was like fucking like mentally had almost completely moved on and was still wearing my old ring, I just knew that doesn't have the significance he thinks it has. And so he has this whole thing he sets up in honor of the way they first met on a yacht where he wants to get like a snow machine and have a picnic. And he believes that sweeping her off her feet with this big romantic gesture is going to be enough to get her to let go of everything that happened and talk to him. And what killed me about this scene was not only how much it missed the point of what it is that's actually bothering her, but how certain he seems that it's going to work. And then the way he talks about everything. Every time he references what he did, he says, every time you look at me, you're thinking about what happened. Okay, let's talk about language here, kids. What happened isn't the way. Every time you look at me, you're thinking about what I did. The choices I consistently, repeatedly made. And the ways in which I led you to feel insecure about your observations and your gut feeling regarding what was going on. How about that, Michael? What happened? Like it was just fucking circumstantial and you were just around for it. Like you didn't choose to hide things. You tampered with a crime scene, sir. You jeopardized your whole career in order to get out from under the threat of this baby. Like, you know? So he's saying this in this passive tone that I already feel like is really him trying to remove responsibility from himself. And the way that he says this next part, when you look at me now, you're just thinking about what happened, all the mistakes I've made. And he says mistakes, again, really making it sound like, oopsie. No. We've already been over this previous episode when you tried to say, I made a mistake. That's not just I made a mistake. That's not it. You made a choice over and over again, the same choice. And then he says, and you need to stop thinking about that. You need to remember the important stuff. Bitch, what the fuck do you think you're doing? No, sir. You absolutely are not in any position to come up to her after what you fucking did and tell her what she needs to do. I know you, Jane. You believe in meant to be. We just have to find our way back. Please, Jane, forgive me. And she says, I do. But I can't be with you. And then he gets this absolutely incredulous expression. And she says, I can't explain it. And he's just saying, Jane, this, and laughs, says, this doesn't make sense. I mean, what is it? Because I lied? And the narrator says, of course, it wasn't just that. But let's be clear. It could just be that. Okay? Maybe it's not, and maybe she has feelings for Rafael, and there's a whole thing going on there because Rafael had, by this point, already told her how he feels about her. But if she chose to leave Michael just over this, that would still 100% be enough. And him acting like, oh, so I just lied about this one thing and suddenly you're willing to throw it all away? This is the shit that gets me so angry, because this is how women get gaslit into staying in relationships with men who do not respect them. And that's what it comes down to. He didn't believe that what was important to Jane mattered. It's as simple as that. It was all about what he wanted, and that she was being too clingy to this baby because she was like hormonal, or, you know, her religion, which he doesn't believe in. And so he doesn't give it the same weight. All of the ways that she felt about being pregnant with a kid and wanting to give birth to her child, he was willing to absolutely ignore. And if you go into any, like, this is the sort of, when I talk about women getting gaslit, him trying to boil it down to, because I lied, is so purposefully obtuse, and it is such a trite method. There are so many dudes who will do this. They will do something incredibly fucked up, and then they will try and act like you being mad about it is the real crazy part. Even though, again, with Michael, it's not like he did one thing one time without thinking. It is every day he would wake up with the intent to continue lying to her. Every day he would do something more and more desperate to keep up the lie that he had told her, so that she would do something that if she were fully informed, she would never have done. And he didn't care. And the number of, like, if any of you are familiar with Reddit, there are, am I the asshole? There's like a whole Reddit section. And it's wild because the ones written by men are them having done the shadiest shit you can imagine. And then being like, I don't get why she's so mad, and I think she really overreacted. And the ones written by women, and I'm not saying this is 100%, but it is really a very strong correlation. The ones written by women they're sharing a story of a man doing something so unthinkable, and then being like, but I don't know, am I just overreacting? There was one recently about a woman who gave birth, and she decided to go with an epidural because the birth was harder than she expected, which required an overnight stay and some extra procedures, which cost several $1,000s more, and her husband wouldn't help her pay for it. He made her pay for it herself out of her personal savings account, because he said if she wanted to have a luxury birth, she should have planned for it. Let me just leave a little silence there so that sinks in. And she was asking if she was being unreasonable, being angry. I think you're being unreasonable not leaving him immediately and taking the child with you. That is lunatic behavior. That's abusive. Just straight up being like, well, you have to pay for your own medical things. Are you kidding? What? So this whole thing, it's just like, yeah, is this an over dramatized situation because we're watching something that is very much like a telenovela? Sure. Is what's going on with them that far out of the realm of the things that I have seen men try and pull and then gaslight women into thinking is not a big deal? No, absolutely not. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised to see a fucking story like this. This is exactly the type of shit that pops up. So as far as I am concerned, not only did she do the right thing leaving Michael, but the fact that he is so incredulous that what he did was enough for her to like leave him is in and of itself evidence that he has no idea what it means to be a decent partner to somebody and isn't ready to get married. And it would have been a mistake to marry him if this is the way he thinks and this is the way he prioritizes himself over her. And I do not believe that they should get back together. I don't have any hang-ups about wanting them to figure out a way to work it out. None of that. Now, I also want to say, though, I don't really like Rafael that much. You know, is he fine? Yeah, I guess. Like, he's not my type at all. But sure, okay. I don't think he's particularly charming. They have decent chemistry together. I just feel like the whole situation with her is so fraught that I don't think he should have told her that he had feelings for her, personally. I think that as her boss and as the father of the child, the power dynamic is fucked up. And she is in a really vulnerable position. And I think it was sort of inappropriate for him to tell her and be honest with her. I'm sure it makes him feel better to have been honest with her. But that's not what I care about. Like, who cares how you feel, dude? It's not about you. So there are times where you just kind of have to sit on how you feel for the sake of the other person and work that shit out privately, because it really, when it comes down to it, it may feel like it has something to do with them and it doesn't actually. It's really your shit to deal with. And like knowing that she is currently dealing with this pregnancy, doesn't know what to do, has just found out that you and Petra are not together, and you very recently were threatening legal action against her to fight for custody in a truly dickish way. And granted, he was acting this way because he was like up against Michael in that room, but I don't care. You were still behaving that way. And now you're trying to sit here and be like, I have feelings for you. Not the fucking time, man. Like, just, you know that she's in the midst of this potential breakup with Michael. And he even says, I'm telling you in case it means anything or it changes anything. So he's acknowledging that, like, I'm potentially putting this out there if it helps motivate you to break up with him. And I just think that's a fucked up thing to do. I understand wanting to tell her, and I'm not mad at him for that, but I just think it was the wrong thing to do. And I understand that she also has feelings for him, but they're both in too much of a cloud right now to make smart decisions about any of this. So what I'm hoping is that even though this episode ends with the two of them making out under a snowfall of flower petals with a rising romantic song playing in the background, I really want the next episode to start off with her being like, you know what, that was a mistake. And there are times where you start a romance and then the next episode you put the kibosh on it or hit the brakes. That can feel like, oh, okay, we're just drawing out the drama. And it's just, you know, kind of feels contrived and cheap to stretch things out. I will not feel that way about it with this, if that's what they do, because it is a mistake. You know, I understand everything he says in terms of what are the odds? We kiss 5 years ago and then now you're pregnant with my kid, and doesn't this feel like it was meant to be? And the problem is it does, right? Like, this is a sort of thing that I have always been somebody who has a very strong belief in, like, the meant to be, and it would win me over like crazy. So I'm not even going to try and front that this argument and line of attack wouldn't work on me. It 100% would work on me. I know it would. And it's like embarrassing, low key, that it would work, but it would. And I'm going to be frank about that. I just feel like y'all both need some time. You just found out your wife was sleeping with your best friend, and now she's faked a punch to the face to get money out of you. Like, you are also not in a place, sir, where you need to be getting into a relationship. I would honestly, if I were him and I was dealing with a wife who was this vindictive, I would be worried for Jane's safety in all of this. You know, like, she was working on using Jane as an angle because she was hoping that you wanting to raise the child was going to be enough to keep you in the marriage. But now she's seen that that is not going to be the angle. That's not going to work. So what motivation does she have anymore to care about this child that Jane's carrying? It's not hers. It's only yours. And if Jane's in her way, who knows what the fuck she would do, you know? And granted, he doesn't know just how motivated she is for this money and like what's going on with her. Granted, I don't really know what's going on with her. But it would be on my mind to be worried about putting Jane in her crosshairs. That's all I'm saying. So that's Jane and Rafael and Michael dealt with mostly. But I was so angry at Michael. This really reminded me, for those of you who are listening to me and Rashawn covering Song of Ice and Fire, we just covered the chapters where Jorah Mormont like gets caught being a traitor, and Dany has him come into the throne room for an opportunity to sort of repent and ask forgiveness because she wants to forgive him. And he comes in with this fucking attitude and this like, I can't believe you're even mad at me about such a small thing. And it's the same energy. And Daenerys winds up with like no choice but to exile him, basically. And he's like genuinely shocked. And she walked in intending to forgive him. But when she was faced with the way he was deciding to handle everything, she just realized there was no way she could do it and still fool herself into thinking that he respected her as a ruler. And that's where it feels like Michael just doesn't respect Jane. He loves her, but like the things that are important to her fundamentally as a person, I feel like he holds them in contempt a little bit. And that's just not going to work. You know, it's just, I feel like he sees her as naive in a way that maybe in some senses she is, but like, I don't know. Jane isn't, she's like idealistic. Naive and idealistic are not the same thing. And I don't know. I feel like Michael is not giving her the credit that she is due. So anyway, all right, let's back it up here. And we have her finding out that she gets a message from the place that does the placement for her. Let's see, where is it? Here it is. Okay, yeah. There has to be a big mistake. They gave me my student teaching placement finally, and they put me at Our Lady of Sorrows Catholic High School. And her mother is horrified that it's Catholic school, but Jane is like, that's not the problem. It is a high school. And she really wanted a middle school. And we see her on the phone with this woman, and it turns out that she was bullied a little bit when she was in high school. And so she has a very strong association between being bullied in high school and not wanting to teach high school, because she feels like by the time you get to high school, whatever your personality is kind of fixed. I would like to go on the record and say that's bullshit. Middle schoolers are tiny little sociopathic monsters. And there is, in my opinion, very little getting through to middle schoolers because they don't understand consequences. It's just, they don't. It's like, I think about who I was in middle school, and my personality was so underdeveloped, I barely spoke. And you guys see me now. Does that sound like me? By the time I got to middle school, now I was coming out of my shell and actually becoming the performer and somebody who was very vocal and wound up, frankly, being the center of attention most of the time. I was absolutely the opposite of that in middle school. My personality was nowhere remotely close to what it became. And thus, in my opinion, the lessons you learn, it's like a real 50-50 shot if they're going to like land and stick. Middle school is where I think things begin to sink in a totally different way, because you're starting to comprehend that there's a finish line to this and then the real world that you're going to have to go out into. And that's not to say that you become serious and become responsible, but there's a sense of self that develops that's a much stronger through line. And just because she got bullied in high school, I do not think that means high school is a lost cause. And honestly, I have not spoken to absolutely anybody who was bullied in high school and didn't get bullied in middle school. Everybody I know, like high school, were people like dicks to them sometimes, sure. But the actual bullying, where people would like kind of gang up and make an exhibit out of you and try to humiliate you, that was middle school. And that's 100% my experience. And that is definitely the experience of like at least a dozen people that I have talked to about this. Middle school is so much worse in that regard. So she's wrong. I forgive her, but she's wrong. And I think also the show wants her to have this sort of phobia of Mean Girls, and also wants her to have to deal with high schoolers, because high schoolers are frankly going to be a lot easier to film. So she's on her way to dealing with that on the bus, and then she gets this call from Rafael apologizing. And then we get a scene with Xiomara, and she is doing a sort of breathing exercise with Rogelio. And it's an interesting moment because he's like behind her and has his arms around her. And it's obvious that she is like, yeah, she's having a moment of just being really attracted to him and needing to step back a little bit. But she mentions hoping that her voice can actually fill the lounge where she's singing. And when he says, well, that's what you have a band for, she says, well, I don't actually have a band. And he offers to help her with one of the bands that he has recorded with himself. And as he is telling her that he'll help her, the two of them are just about to start kissing when his ex-wife walks in. And she is like, I wanted to apologize. I didn't mean to be such a bitch to you when we first met. I didn't know who you were to him. And as she is saying this, I'm just like, that is such a crock. This is absolutely untrue. She's lying. It's because you guys are in front of Rogelio. And he does buy it. And he says, will you book her a band? And she says, absolutely, right away. You should go down to the lobby. There's a reporter from, some channel to interview you. And I'm like, uh-huh. And as soon as he is out of there, so stay away from him. And then she accuses her of being a gold digger and is like, you didn't even want him in your life until you knew that he was rich and successful. And I was just like, look, I really do get why you would think that. I mean, but he was literally stalking his daughter. Like, she didn't want him to tell Jane who he was. And he was refusing to listen. Like, this was obviously a big deal for him. So the whole thing, whatever. So it doesn't really matter because what it comes down to is just the fact that Melissa is going to hate Xiomara no matter what and be threatened by her and jealous of her. And so even if there is a perfectly good reason why things went the way they did, she's not going to believe it, So then we go to this family dinner that they are all attending at this restaurant together. And Melissa's daughters are with them. And they are these identical twins who are such great bitches. They're really, because they have this wonderful, like, they're sharp edged when they speak, but their appearance is extremely wholesome and sweet. They've got, their hair is just like gentle waves, and they've got these flushed pink cheeks, very minimal makeup, like a really natural look that gives them a super youthful appearance. They have dimples when they smile. Like, their whole vibe is just like they could be on a cereal box. You know what I mean? And then they just say these things that are vicious. I mean, and they keep on emphasizing how Rogelio basically upended his entire life in order to be closer to Jane and is fawning over her in such a way that both of these girls are literally looking at each other like, oh my God, while they're at the dinner table, even though Jane is attempting to downplay things. And he is just going on and on about how teaching is one of the noblest professions in the world. But then one of the girls chimes in with, is it true you're a pregnant virgin? And she looks at Rogelio like, did you really fucking tell them that? And his excuse is, I just didn't want them to be under any delusions about your purity, which is the creepiest possible explanation, Rogelio. And one of them says, why haven't you swiped your V card? Can you not find anybody who wants to have sex with you? And they both at the exact same time pick up their glasses and take a sip out of their straw as they look at her. And it's honestly perfect. It's just perfect. They're just very, very good. TB in the chat says, the Morel twins, they're such sweethearts in real life. The Morel twins, are they from something else? The way you're saying that makes me feel like they're from something and I should know them, but I don't recognize them. So fill me in if there's something else. So when Shamara and Jane are leaving, Jane is like, obviously Shamara is trying to be like, well, I can take them down a few pegs. And Jane is saying, I actually kind of felt bad for them. The way that Rogelio is going so overboard probably does make them feel bad. I need to talk to him about toning it down a little bit more. And when she turns the corner, there is a Mini Cooper with a giant bow on it as a gift for Jane. And the twins are standing there with their arms crossed, glaring at her. And Jane winds up having this sort of moment later, and I loved this so much. She what winds up happening is she tells Rogelio that the girls are acting up because they're jealous, and he interprets this as, let me get them both a car, which is not the solution, but I get why his mind would go there instead. But Jane talks with Rogelio later and is like, I told you not to do these big meaningless gestures. And we get a really great scene that I loved so much. He's like, a car is not meaningless to me, Jane. And he explains how he was fucking broke 5 years ago. And that he didn't have anything to his name. And getting a car, it was a big deal that he had to save up for and really work toward. And it wasn't until he was 35 that he was able to buy one. And that he feels he has missed out on so many big moments in her life and has only gotten to meet her now that she is a grown-up with a job and a career that she's working toward and a pregnancy, and she's got things in place and he doesn't have anything to contribute. And a car felt important. And you guys, I got so choked up over this because my father was somebody who had a really hard time sharing how he felt. And he got better about that as he got older. But it was not always easy. And I didn't realize fully until he was gone how much he expressed how he felt by providing. And it was either via a car or working on a car for me or buying me pieces of furniture, things like that. And I remember I was going through a rough patch with him, feeling very disconnected from him. And I had a dream where I was talking to him about feeling like he was angry at me. And in the dream, he said, well, you're getting married and you have a job, and I feel like you're just not going to need me anymore. And it was the kind of dream where I woke up and I was like, well, maybe that was a dream, but that's true. Like, some dreams you just take at face value, you're just like, oh no, that was me and him having a conversation for sure. And that is sort of the vibe I'm getting off of this with Rogelio, is like, he knows what it's like to not have support and to be without. And if he could have been there for her in all of these other capacities so that she didn't have to suffer and strain herself for things, he would have, but he couldn't. He wasn't there. So he's going to try to make up for that in every way that he possibly can. And does it seem like overkill? Yes, especially because he feels like a stranger still. But to him, this is part of his responsibility as a parent that he was not given the opportunity to fulfill. And now he's trying to just make up for it all at once. So it's going to seem like a lot, but to him, it's like not even really enough, And I just really appreciated this conversation and how much it makes her stop and understand where he's coming from with that. And that it's not the way that things went when they first met and how he was trying to impress her. All of that was very much about him. It was self-centered and vain. But this thing with the car, it could feel like it's about him, but really it's not. It just kind of looks that way because he can't resist doing it in such a fashion that he is kind of centered in it, And I really also, considering the fact that she's pregnant, you're going to want a car, Jane. Like, trust me, girl. I don't even have kids. And I know from secondhand experience how much dealing with a child without having transportation blows the big one. So don't look a gift horse in the mouth, girl. Once this kid is around, and if you do have any custody, you are absolutely going to want to have a car. And that's outside of what he mentions, which is her having to go to the doctor and stuff, which is another really good point. So like, just overall, I really liked that moment of them having that heart to heart, you know? So, okay, let's talk about, we have a couple of things that here's where I'm at. I'm like 50 minutes into this recording, and I haven't even started talking about the twins bullying Jane at her new job. And I'm going to be honest with you guys. I found it super unpleasant, and I don't want to talk about it. I'm going to talk about it very briefly. For me, it was like the least interesting part of things. So I'm going to just go through it really quick. They got transferred to her school because Rogelio is obsessed with her and wants them to be in her class. And they immediately out her as being pregnant with this faux innocence. And then make a website about her and have all of these like photos that they post. And when they get their Mini Coopes, they park on either side of her so tight that she has to climb out of the back. And I'm like, girl, just move. Just repark somewhere else. What are you doing? But anyway, they, at one point, the girl like smashes her tablet and stamps on it, but then like screams as if it's Jane that did it and gets her in trouble. And then finally, Jane is like at her wit's end because she gets fired basically. And she goes to her mom and is like, okay, look, I know that I said I don't want to deal with them your way, but clearly my method of compassion isn't working. What should I do? So Xiomara sets them up to be basically like seduced away from their phones by Rafael at the beach in the weirdest scene, you guys, where he's like flirting with these high schoolers and the high school girls are like into it. And this is the sort of thing where I personally wouldn't ever react this way as a high schooler, because I had a very strong sense of how creepy older men doing this to teenage girls was, from hearing a lot of horror stories from my mother, who had been abused and taken advantage of a lot. So I was hypersensitive to that sort of thing. And any dude coming up to me as like a 15, 16-year-old on the beach, I would absolutely not have gone and hung out with him. Like, it would have been super creep to me that he was coming to talk to me at all. These girls, though, different type. So he comes up and sort of like, oh, you want to go swimming, girls? And they both trot off with him, allowing Jane to go and get their, or I think it's Xiomara, to go and get their phones. And then Jane takes a bunch of photos off of their phones and threatens the next time she sees them to post them everywhere. I love that she mentions like pre-nose job as well, because she could say, I have all these unflattering selfies, or I have like, you know, dirty pictures you were sending to your boyfriends. And that could be just a guess. But if she specifically says pre-nose job, that feels like, though, that's a definite specific thing that she would have to know for sure. And she tells them, if you don't go and tell the Mother Superior I didn't do any of the shit you accuse me of, I'm going to post these all over the fucking place. Now, personally, if I were these girls, I would have called her bluff, because I don't buy that Jane would have posted those. But I know Jane pretty well by now, and they probably don't. And they probably assume she's going to be just as hateful towards them as they've been towards her. So, okay. And they wind up immediately capitulating and apologizing. And then they express that they're worried what their mom's going to think. And Jane is like, you should have thought of that before you went and did this shit. And one of them says, it's easy for you to say you have these amazing parents. Our mom is a bitch, and we don't even know who our dad is or where he is. And all of a sudden, Jane sort of steps back and is like, I guess I didn't see it that way. And like, look, honestly, cry me a fucking river, bitches. Everybody has their problems. That does not mean everybody goes around and makes people's lives miserable. You know, like it's a fine line between having compassion for somebody's position and excusing the shit they do. And I just don't really even have compassion for them, to be perfectly honest. So that's where I'm at. I think if they hadn't been so absolutely cunty straight from like out of the gate, I maybe could have forgiven things a little bit more. But there was no moment in which they weren't massive bitches. So that's, for me, their personality now. And speaking of massive bitches, Shamara is about to perform in the lounge, and these girls, their mom is supposed to have booked this band, and the band that she shows Shamara is all of these beautiful young women who apparently Rogelio has slept with. And she's doing this to just intimidate and get under her skin. But when it comes down to the actual night of, she doesn't even book them. She tells the band not to come and then acts as if Shamara got like there was a miscommunication, which I did really appreciate that Rogelio immediately knows that she's full of shit. And he talks to Shamara after and is like, I excuse her a lot of the time and look the other way, but I'm not going to do that. And I was like, thank you. Because if he was stupid enough to fall for that, it was a miscommunication. Shut up. And Shamara has to go out there and sing a cappella. And her voice is beautiful and she's great, but God, I hated this scene. I just hate watching people sing with very few exceptions. And this is, I hated it, you guys. It was really tough. And I like appreciate that. Yes, she nailed it. And considering she had no backup, sure. But I just, no. And also the fact that like the whole thing, there was supposed to be just the one song, I guess. I don't know if it's supposed to be that she did more than one and we just only saw the one, but it felt like the performance was like the one song. Whatever it is, she manages without the band. And, you know, this is a major victory for her, but I just really don't like watching this stuff. And I'm like rooting for her, but I'd really rather not see it most of the time. I'll be perfectly honest with you. So when she freaks out about there not being a band, we have just had the scene of Jane breaking up with Michael, and she shows up at the hotel and talks to Rogelio about the car. And then I guess you didn't miss every big thing because she's dumped Michael, and he is like comforting her and having this moment with her. But then when Shamara and Melissa come and like start this drama, it interrupts the talk that he's having with Jane, who says, I'll let you handle this. I'll see you later, and leaves. And he gets up and says, you just interrupted a beautiful moment between me and my daughter. So what is it? And Shamara, because she is an absolute angel and the light of my life, doesn't even get mad about like, well, this is important too. Her immediate thought is, oh my God, I fucked up a moment. I fucked up a moment. What a precious angel. I love her so much. Ugh. And so later on, when he's about to kiss her, Shamara is like, no, look, I really like you. We have a very strong thing, and I get that. But the two of us together is going to completely throw the dynamic off between you and Jane. It's just going to complicate everything. We cannot be carrying on with each other while you're trying to get to know her and develop a relationship with her. It's just not smart, and it's not kind to her. And I was like, God damn it, but you are fucking right. Shamara for the win. She's so great. I just love how frequently she makes these calls that would not have occurred to me, you know, because like, I'm not a mom and I'm just not used to thinking this way. And so I had a beautiful moment with my daughter and you interrupted. My instinct would be to just be like, a beautiful moment. Okay, dude, because he's such a drama queen that I would be like dismissive of it, which is really shitty of me, you know? And I love the fact that she takes that shit super seriously, immediately, just like, oh no. So what this ends up with is him agreeing that they are not going to sleep together, and also saying that he is going to take a stand regarding Melissa. And I really don't know what that's going to look like. This is the same thing I meant when I opened the episode talking about what long-term things are going to look like, because like Melissa and then the twins, we don't see Melissa put in her place. We see him saying he's going to handle her. We don't see what he does. So I don't know how much to believe that he's going to handle her and what her response is going to be. My assumption is her response will be simply to get sneakier about it. The twins, it feels like they've been quelled, and that while they will still have their snotty instincts and maybe do the occasional thing that's like fucking snide, I don't think they're going to be as like malicious the same way they have been. We'll see. And then there's also the aspect of the Mother Superior who finally agrees to give Jane her job back. And she's looking at the website of Jane, the pregnant virgin, and thinking that maybe people will like be drawn back to the church. So she has her own weird reason for wanting Jane to be part of the school, which is so strange. And I'm like, I really don't know where that's going. And, to wrap up, like kind of the last little bit of story. Well, actually there's two little bits of storyline. We have Petra, who's refusing to leave the apartment, and what Rafael is trying to do is drive her out by like cutting off the power and the water and everything. But she and her mom don't want to move because if she abandons the property, then that's technically grounds for him to claim it and not let her in. So she's squatting, basically. And there is a woman who shows up. Now, first there's a confrontation between her and... No. The woman shows up first. And then what happens with this guy and the gun is in another room where they have to move because they're getting one night in a different room before they have to like leave the property. So the woman that Rafael brings is a cleaning lady. And this is a really interesting thing because she claims to not recognize her. And Rafael says, she saw you leaving my office the day that you claim I hit you without a scratch on you. And she's willing to testify to that fact. And making a false claim of assault can get you thrown in jail. So when Petra says, well, I don't remember seeing you, the lady's retort is, yeah, and you also didn't recognize me just now, so I'm not surprised. I'm going to call it, though. This lady wasn't there. I don't doubt Petra would not notice for a moment a cleaning lady. I really believe that's exactly the type of person that she is. But I believe that Rafael knows that, and that he could just take any cleaning lady and pay her and get her to say this. And I'm not mad at him for that at all. You know, like that's 100% valid. I do too really enjoy the way this woman like looks at Petra with her eyes narrowed, because there's a real sense of like, yeah, fuck you. Like she knows Petra is full of shit. And there's a part of me that feels like two ways about that, because women who come out saying that they have been abused get disbelieved so much that even though I want people to see through what Petra's doing, anytime somebody doesn't believe her, it gets my dander up a little bit. So I have like real mixed feelings about it. So this lady being like, yeah, fuck you. Part of me is like, if he did just pay you, that's a fucked up attitude to be taking. If you didn't actually see her leave. However, maybe she did see her leave. And she's feeling really like, yeah, I was there. And you don't recognize me because you don't notice people like me. And you're out here trying to fucking soak this guy for $1 million. So fuck you. So, you know, we'll see how that happens. But Petra is forced to leave the apartment. And then she gets confronted by this guy, Ivan, in their room later on. And it's such a weird thing. She thinks that the person at the door is somebody bringing the toilet paper. And when she answers it, he comes in. And I love when he's like trained the gun on Petra's mom. Her mom says, I'm not getting shot tonight. I saw it in the cards, which I don't know why, but that shit cracked me up. And Petra bashes him on the head with the urn of Zazo's remains. And they just stare at him on the ground. And her mom looks at her and just says, now what? And there's just this moment of her shrugging and looking at her mom. And we leave them and don't go back to them. So I have no idea how they're handling this fucking dude. Very curious, because now she's got the upper hand. Like, he came up in here with this gun with a feeling to me like he was coming here to kill somebody for sure. And he's not dead. He's just knocked out. So what are you going to do? Are you going to kill him? She's already kind of been under suspicion. Like, I don't feel like that she can get away with that. But I don't know her. I don't know what's happening here. So I can't make a prediction about what she should do because I don't really know the angle. So then the other thing that was the last thing to wrap up is going back to Michael. There's a moment with him in the locker room when they're searching for stuff with the bellhop, and his partner finds this piece of paper lodged in the locker, like up in the seam of the metal. And it's this number that they think at first is a phone number. And he says something to her like, good eye. And she gets this real sort of like smirky look on her face. And I was like, oh my God, is she into Michael? Ugh. And then later, when he's on the yacht by himself after having been dumped, he's got his binoculars and he's just like looking at this ship that's right there that apparently is connected to the case. And he realizes the significance of the numbers as being like a shipping container and a dock number and things like that. So he gets very excited because this is going to blow things open for him. But personally, I don't really care because Sin Nostro doesn't interest me anymore. I'll be honest, I'm kind of over that. Sin Nostro feels like extremely separate from everything else that's happening right now. And like it only has to do with Michael. And I know that's not true because it's all happening within the hotel. So everybody's really technically involved. But at this time, because Michael is like the forerunner of the characters involved with that, and I don't like Michael anymore, that whole plot can just sort of go away. I would be fine with it. So I'm over time. I have to wrap up, but thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. Sorry for starting late. Crowdcast sucks. Apologies. I appreciate you all, and I hope you're enjoying the coverage. I am really enjoying the show. Until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.